WordPress is dead, or at least it ought to be. There's a bunch of different options out there on the market now that can do as much or more than WordPress and at lower overall costs. And I don't just mean that monetarily. I also mean that from a resource and speed perspective. One of the awesome ways that you can set up your website that is really popular among people that don't really blog all that often is a GitHub website, which is basically just a straight HTML website run off of a free GitHub page. I've seen people create websites off of Google Sheets. If you're looking for a little bit more, WordPress is really tempting, except when you realize that it was made back in 2003 when CPU speed was cheap and hard drive speed was expensive. Now that we're at 2021, that logic has reversed, and your hard drive space and memory speeds are cheap, but the CPUs are expensive, and CPU time. So today, as a blogger, I'm going to take you through the CMS that I use for blogging and for posting video content. It's Grav CMS. The difference between Grav and a WordPress is Grav uses flat files, so they're all text files. It's very similar to HTML. It does use PHP to reference between them, which makes it really easy to spin up new pages with a nice on-screen GUI interface. I've mentioned this before. I do like my user interfaces. I am a little bit of a normie like that, coming from the marketing side with some IT knowledge. In that sense, a WordPress is attractive relative to an HTML website. But with Grav, you get a lot of those benefits, but you don't have a database because everything is based in a flat file. And that speeds up the performance of your website substantially, especially since almost every hosting provider now uses solid-state disks to feed information out to the users over the internet. So let's jump in to how to set up a Grav website. I will be following the instructions for DigitalOcean. This is the hosting provider that I use. But I reviewed the Linode, the Rose hosting, and the Vultr hosting instructions, and they all look pretty much identical as far as I can tell. Now that our server's started up, we're just going to log in using the credentials we created during the setup last time. And we're going to ifconfig. And we can see here that our IP address on the local network is 192.168.1.19. Now we can fire up PuTTY so we can get a more customizable window with a font that's a little bit easier on my eyes. Now that we fired up PuTTY, I'm going to take that IP address 192.168.1.19 and I'm going to save this under the profile of Grav Video and save. There's a couple more things that I do want to do here, and one of those is to adjust the fonts. Again, as in my last video, to make it easier on my eyes, I went ahead and I already set this to Deja Vu Sans Mono. And for selection, for my paste action, I'm going to choose Control-Shift-C and Control-Shift-V for access to my clipboard. I know some software engineers like to set this as right mouse click, which I believe is this option right here. But I really like my action to be very definitive. And I will save both of these customizations to the profile. Now we can open it up and we see our PuTTY window. If you're looking to follow along, the documentation that I will be using is from the Grav DigitalOcean website, which is right here. I will leave a link in the description. There is one significant change that I will be making to the way that Grav instructs you to set up the website, and that is that we will be using PHP version 7.4, which is the most up-to-date as of January 1st, 2021. Eventually, there's going to be PHP 8 that's slated for, I think, the end of next year. That's going to be awesome for Grav 2.0, which the Grav team has announced that they are starting to consider making. So you can take that for what it's worth, and we will go into it. Rather than following the DigitalOcean instructions here for how to set up a droplet, we set up that virtual machine during the last video, and the reason for that is setting up virtual machines is basically free. As long as you have virtualization enabled on your processor in your motherboard BIOS, you should be able to set up a virtual machine. Most motherboards disable this by default, but you can almost always turn them on because most consumer grade processors have the same technologies built in as you would find on a server. With PuTTY, we will just log in as we did last time in the last video. And we are in and ready to go. Something important to note about this documentation here, almost all of these commands, it looks like, are set up assuming that you're logged in as root. My profile is set up under Nick, and I'm not logged in under root because I didn't set that up. So for each of these commands, make sure to type in sudo before any of them. So the first command here you can see is apt update. Well, if you're logged in as root, that will work. If not, then you need to sudo apt update. And then we'll upgrade. If this takes any amount of time, then I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to make this video as short as possible. And it looks like the apt upgrade is not necessary because the system is saying that all of my packages are up to date. The next thing down is sudo apt remove Apache 2. If you go to an online hosting provider, most likely they are going to install Apache 2 Plus by default. In my case, I didn't install that, so that's not necessary. And then the next command here is sudo apt auto remove. That just helps clean up some of the additional packages that are left over. Now we're getting into the more detailed parts, which is installing the software that we need. I'm going to paste this command in here from the instructions. This is sudo apt install vim zip unzip nginx git php fpm cli. There's a whole list of them. I'm going to remove vim. Again, I really should learn it, but I am not quite there yet. Although that is coming up after I make some other major life changes. So we will go ahead and install all of those packages. This might take a second, so I'm going to pause the video right here. The next instruction is to vim into etc php 7.2 fpm and php ini. Instead of using vim, I'm going to use nano and open up that file, which doesn't exist. And this is one of the important things about the documentation being slightly out of date. If you look here, 7.2 fpm, if I manually type this in rather than copy as is suggested in the Grav documentation, if I type in 7 and then I click tab, because tab will autocomplete in Linux, I have PHP 7.4 installed. This is going to be important later on because there was a mistake that I made the first time through this that you will likely run into as far as putting 7.2 into a text document somewhere in these instructions. So you can see that the instructions that I've typed in here are virtually identical except for the 7.4. And we're going to open up this document. Now it wants us to uncomment something called cgi.fix_pathinfo. So cgi.fix_path_info. You can see that the semicolon here comments this specific statement out. So I'm going to delete the semicolon because it says to uncomment it. And we are going to change this 1 to a 0. And I pressed Control O and Enter to save it out. And now I'm going to Control X to exit the document. The next command is systemctl restart PHP 7.4, not 7.2 as is in the documentation, dash FPM. And the service is restarted. Now we're going to configure the Nginx connection pool. The last thing that we did, and this appear to be security settings to make sure that no one can access files in your system that you don't want them to access. So the command here is cd etc php 7.4 fpm pool.d. We can go ahead and ls. This will always allow us to see whatever files are in this specific folder. And we're going to move www.confd, tab to autocomplete, to www.conf.back. And this is a good way to back up things. If you don't know what's changed, you can always revert by swapping it back. So if it looks like I need to do sudo exclamation point, and we can see that that moved. Now if we ever want to revert that, we can move to that, and we can see that it is right back to where it was before. Now I'm just going to clear the screen by typing in clear. And I'm going to create a new document by sudo nano and call it grav.conf. Now from here, we can take the text right out of the Grav documentation. And I'm going to Control-Shift-V to copy and paste everything into this document and then verify that everything's correct first before I save it out. So you can see already var run PHP 7.2. That's not correct. We want PHP 7.4. So you have to be extremely careful when you're looking at these text documents, because if you were typing this into the command line, it would tell you, hey, that command isn't right, this file doesn't exist, 7.2. But when you're copy and pasting it into a text document, you're not going to know until the system doesn't work, and then you're going to have to figure it out by going into the error logs, which I'll show you how to do before this video is over. Now I'm going to Control O to save out, and then Control X to exit. Now we can add user, Grav. By adding user Grav, we've just created a new folder, a new home directory for a Grav user. And that will allow this Grav user to have the necessary permissions in order to work on the website. So click Enter, and only root can do that. For Grav, I'm going to use a very simple password. Again, because This will not be available from the internet, and I'm going to blow up this virtual machine after this video is created anyway, or after this video series is completed. After you've logged in all of the information, we're going to change to use the profile of Grav. So this command is sudo su-grav, and we are going to ls. It looks like we are in our home directory. So we are going to make directory, make dir, www.html. And now if we ls again, we will see www. So we're going to change directories into www.html. Now to test that everything is up and running, the instructions say to create a file called working, or called index.html with the content of working. So I'm going to nano. You don't need sudo because this is the directory that is owned by user Grav. Index.html. Now we can put in an h1 tag, which is the highest priority tag of headings. And then we're going to close out this h1 tag. Now we're going to Control O to save, Enter, and then Control X to exit. After we create the index.html file, we're going to create a PHP file, which is nano info.php. And for this, we will do $question php php info, close the tag, and then close that off with a semicolon to end the statement. And Control O to save it, Control X to exit. Now that we've created the index.html file and the php.info files, we still can't test if the site is working or if Nginx is going to the right folder because Nginx isn't pointed where we need it to be yet. To make sure that Nginx is pointed to the right place, I'm just going to go ahead and clear, and then I'm going to exit the Grav profile and go back to the Nginx profile and go to my home folder because I'm pretty deep in the directories here. Now we can cd etc nginx sites available, and there should be a 000-default file in here. Oh, it's just default. I'm going to sudo nano grav and create a file called grav. And we're just going to create a bit of configuration for Nginx. And I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And I made a mistake here, but we will go back on how to troubleshoot that before this is over. With Nginx, one of the things that it does is in your sites available folder, it has all of the sites available. But Nginx won't point anywhere until you link to sites enabled. What we're going to do now is we are going to remove the link for the default page, and we are going to add a link for Nginx. And we're going to add a link for Grav. So we're going to change directory to sites enabled. And we're going to create, using the ln command, this creates a link. S for symbolic, sites available, Grav. So we're going to create a link in this folder for sites available Grav, which is the text document we just created. We need to sudo that, which should look like this. I know in a lot of these I've just been doing sudo exclamation point, exclamation point. And we've created this link here for Grav. Now we're going to remove the default link. To test this configuration, we can type in sudo nginx-t. And the syntax looks fine. But like I told you before, I made a mistake. With a test that comes up clean, we will type in systemctl. Actually, I'm going to sudo that. Systemctl restart nginx. And then systemctl restart PHP 7.4, but I'm going to do a 7.2 just to show that this creates an error. Failed to restart PHP 7.2 service. It's because it doesn't exist. And this is very much related to the mistake that I made by typing into that text document or copying and pasting it without reviewing the contents of it. All right, now to show the error. On this tab here, we have 192.168.1.19, and we will go ahead and refresh this page. All right, it didn't induce the error like I was expecting. The page is working, or it's showing is working, and I think that has to do with the fact that index.html is an HTML file, so the text communicates over the internet just fine. It is not referencing the info.php file. So now we can change profile. So I'm going to sudo su grav to log in as the Grav user. And from the Grav profile, I'm going to wget from the Grav site. So cd www, and you can see that there's the HTML file in here. We're going to input this command here. When you've been using Linux as long as I have, you will run into the habit of always typing in sudo when you don't need it. I typed in sudo for the Grav profile even though it wasn't necessary. So rather than go through those steps, I'm going to show you right now. All you need to do is type in wget-o or 0. I can't remember which one it is. I've had to trial and error when I've manually typed that in before, from the latest Grav site, and it's going to download as grav.zip. Go ahead and press enter, and it will download the file. Next, we're going to unzip grav.zip, and we will remove our HTML file with rm rf. The capital R does a recursive, so it deletes all of the containing files and documents, and then F forces through the removal of the HTML directory. Now press enter, and we can move Grav, which it should just be Grav, yeah. Move Grav to HTML. And we can see that Grav has now been renamed to HTML. I'm going to clear my profile here. And now we should be able to go to our page 192.168.1.19 and refresh. Now remember how I said that we made a mistake? The mistake was that we didn't read, and we were supposed to direct to FPM 7.4 instead of 7.2. The way that we will uncover our errors is we will go into the Nginx error log, and I'm going to show you where that is right now. Before we can check the error logs, we're going to have to exit out of the Grav profile. So we'll just exit. And then we're going to change directory to var log Nginx. And we'll see here that there's access.log and error log. So I'm going to type in sudo tail error.log. What tail does is it takes you to the tail end of the document, so the last things that actually popped up. And we can see here it says to connect Unix var run php 7.2. This was the mistake. It was supposed to be 7.4. So what you are going to do when you find this is most likely it's going to be in a text document, and you're going to search the instructions for where there were 7.2s, and you're going to verify whether or not you typed in those text documents correctly. I already warned you that I knew where the mistake was, so let's just go over there and change it. So we're going to go to etc Nginx sites available, and we're going to nano sudo nano grav. And when we scroll down this document, it should have been really obvious when I told you that I made a mistake, because I called this out several times in the video before. It's PHP 7.4 fpm.sock. So now we can exit out of this document and then press enter and exit. When we go to 192.168.1.19, it's still not loading, so it looks like there's still other steps that we need to take to get that working again. So let's scroll to the right part of the page where we have these instructions and see what is required after. It looks like we created a link, we removed default. I'm pretty sure that the link still exists, but we'll find out here in a second. We're going to systemctl restart Nginx. And then we're going to restart PHP FPM 7.4. Actually, the Nginx might have been enough. So let's refresh. Nginx was enough. Now we have our default Grav web page. With this default Grav web page, there is one more thing that we need to test, and that is that the admin information is installed. And we have an error 404. So one of the really cool things about Grav is because everything is a flat file system, we can go ahead and completely replace everything in Grav. So we're going to su into the Grav profile and change directory into www. Now we can remove recursive force HTML and then remove Grav, and we can see that there's nothing else in here. Remember when before we used the wget command, we can of course look at that by typing in history. We can see wget-o grav zip and then a link. What we're going to do now is we're going to wget this file here. We're going to download it as grav.zip, but instead of using the link that is in the documentation, we're going to go to the Grav page. And you'll see that here. We're going to go ahead and grab the link from GravCore plus admin plugin. By the time you're watching this, 7.0 will probably, or 1.7.0 will probably be out, and that's going to be the one you're going to want to grab. We right click. I'm going to click on it first, see what happens. Okay, it looks like it takes you right to a download page. So we're going to right click on it. We're going to grab link address, copy link location, and we're going to paste that into PuTTY. Once that's done downloading, we are going to unzip Grav, and we are going to move grav-admin to HTML. To HTML. Enter ls. We can see the HTML files there. Now we can go back 192.168.1.19. We have our Grav web page again, and we are going to / and admin, and boom, we have our Grav admin profile. We can start getting set up with the website and installing plugins, just adding blogs if we want. So thank you for stopping by and going through all of these steps. I hope that the pitfalls sections are helpful for you. If they are, please leave a like and leave a comment down below saying so. This is Nick, signing out.